So welcome to today's video. Thank you so much for joining me. Today we're playing around with a very new release from Charlotte Tilbury, and I could not wait to get my hands on this palette. So when it was available on the app for early access, I snagged it. It's the Beautyverse palette. It's absolutely beautiful. It's the Holiday palette of 2023. And let's just take a moment to talk about the packaging. It is absolutely beautiful. The sparkle, it's like a piece of art. It's so incredibly beautiful. And initially, from looking at it for the first time, it draws you in, that sparkle, that ombre. It's very festive, very holiday, and the packaging is always 10 out of 10 when it comes to Charlotte Tilbury. I have a pretty big stack of Charlotte Tilbury eyeshadows, so I'm going to be comparing the Beautyverse palette that just came out with some of the other ones that I own. I have a lot of her eyeshadows. It's like I said before in previous videos, this is one of my favorite high-end brands. So I am very partial to the brand, but I do love the overall formulas, the way they wear, perform, how they look, the after result when I apply my makeup. It always looks so beautiful, so mesmerizing. So I'm going to definitely dive into this and share with you my thoughts on this new release. So as we already talked about, the packaging is beautiful. It's sparkly. It draws you in immediately. But when you open it up, that's where you see all the pretty sparkles and the eyeshadows. You have 4 mattes, and then you have 5 shimmer glitter toppers and shimmery shadows. There's one that's more of a topper shade that's described as a party topper, which is that kind of silvery shade here. You have some of the matte shades that really truly do feel like creams, and they actually perform like a powder. They blend like powders. It's a really special formula. And if you have this palette and you're swatching those matte shades, you are going to feel how there is something just ultra creamy about this formula. And when I swatched these, it immediately sort of brought to my attention one of my other palettes from Charlotte Tilbury that has that same creamy feel. Like, these are the swatches of the mattes. And I'm not the best at swatching them, but they are incredibly pigmented and just smooth, buttery, very velvety finish. So I have another palette from Charlotte Tilbury that has a very similar texture to it, and I'm going to share that here with you in a moment. But then we have some sparkle. Let's talk about that, because that is probably the very first thing you're going to notice. When you open this palette, you're going to be drawn in and zoom right into these shades. And they're beautiful and pretty. They have a sort of softness to them as far as the tone of colors. They're, to me, seeming more pastel. So it's not necessarily what you would think of typically for fall or holiday Christmas looks that are more deep and more sultry. This is a little bit lighter, but it's a different take on the holidays. So I think it's really pretty. Like, these shadows, like this silvery blue shade is incredibly pigmented. Like, look at that. That is on another level. Like, I just can't. It's creamy, it's buttery, it's smooth. It feels literally like a cream, but it's a powder. And then you have the next shade over, which is described as a topper. This is a party topper. This one is more of a silver kind of sparkle. And you will get a little bit of fallout with this shade, but it's meant to be a topper to other eyeshadows, or to use on top of some of the other colors in this palette. You can layer it just to show you some of the other colors and kind of swatch everything. You have some really pretty sort of purpley shades, really, really nice, very creamy looking. You can see how those are just so reflective and so pretty. And I did have some fallout, but it wasn't terrible. And you will have that happen with glitter eyeshadows. It's just one of those things that comes with using glitters. And if you are familiar with glitter formulas, you probably already know to expect that, and you've experienced that. So you just have to sort of clean up afterwards, like I did. If you do your makeup afterwards, then you really don't have that problem. But because I did my makeup, typically I do first my complexion and all my other products, that I tend to have to go back and clean up with some powder and just sort of kind of try to pick off the glitter specks. But I didn't have a whole ton of trouble doing that with this palette. I do feel like it is easy to work with. They blend well. I kind of already knew that going into this purchase, because I am very familiar with Charlotte Tilbury products and her eyeshadow formulas. So I knew I was going to get something really great here and really great quality. So before I get into the comparisons to some of her other colors and formulas, I want to show you a quick demo of the look that I'm wearing today, and I'm going to talk you through it pretty quickly on how I got to this look today. So if you want to see it, then just continue watching. The first step to any look is applying the MAC Painterly Paint Pot. So I've already done that off camera, and I've also used some of the Charlotte Tilbury pressed powder to set that just so that everything blends smoothly. And I'm going to take a crease brush, and I'm going to start with the lightest shade, which is the very first one in the top row, and that is the Virtual Taupe, which is described as a future matte eyeshadow. And I'm going to start blending this back and forth into my creases. You can see it is very, very pigmented and blends incredibly easily. Like, look at that. Like, very minimal effort, and it's already blended. Love it. I'm going to switch to the Refer 15 brush with nothing on it to continue blending, especially the outer part of my crease, to make sure the lines are nice and soft and it's not too harsh as we work our way towards the brow bone. Then with a BK Beauty 212 brush, I'm going to go to the shade right next to that, which is called Supernova Suede, and it's also a future matte. And this is going to go right on the outer part of my eye to deepen up the outer V and add a little bit more depth to this outer part of my eye. I'm going back in with that first crease brush that I used for the light shade, that's the taupe color, and I'm just going back and forth blending everything together, and I'm not adding any additional product. I just want to continue with the blending process to make sure that everything is to my liking. And I'm just going to add a little bit more and sort of build up right on this outer edge here by just tapping, and then using my other crease brush to blend those edges out a little bit more. Moving on to the lower lash line, I'm going to take my Refer 26 brush with the darkest matte shade in the palette, which is the third one in the upper row. This one is called Space Chocolate, and I'm going to use that to define my lower lash line. And this is a nice, very warm, dark brown. I'm going to wipe off that brush and go into the taupe shade, which is the light color, and use that to blend underneath the Supernova Chocolate on my lower lash line. And then to incorporate the last matte shade, which is the pink color, I'm going to use that same brush. I just wiped it off. Again, that's the Refer number 26 brush. It's a staple for eye looks. And I'm going to take that pink color, which is called Cosmic Pink, and it is also a future matte. And I'm going to take a little bit of that on my lower lash line. Why not? Then I'm going to take a Refer 15 brush with nothing on it and just continue blending again on the lower lash line. I'm going to apply one of the Crystal Glow shadows. This is the Golden Galaxy. I'm going to use my finger to apply this to my lids, and I'm going to press this with my finger. I feel like that's going to be the best way to get the most impact with pigmentation and also glitter, while helping to prevent any sort of fallout, because glitter shadows tends to be a little bit more with the fallout. You will get it sometimes depending on the formula, but I'm patting with my finger instead of using a brush, and I don't see a lot of fallout. I have just a tiny bit right here on this outer corner and just a pinch towards the inner corner that, you know, I can try to clean up, but it's not honestly terrible. There's none on my lower lash line, which is great, and there's none on my under eye area. But I think I'm going to take a little bit of the purple shade here. This one is called Planet Pink, and it's also a Crystal Glow, but this one has a little bit more pigment than the one that I just used. And I'm going to use the same finger to tap this and blend it into the first color that I have on my lids. And I'm going to stick to the outer part of my lower lid. And I'm just going to tap where those two shades meet, just to add something different and fun to try to incorporate as many of these colors as I can. So I think I'm going to come to a stopping point and add a little bit of eyeliner and mascara to complete the look, and then I will show you how everything kind of comes together. Alright, so here is the completed eye look with some eyeliner. I did a liquid liner, and I also did the Pillow Talk mascara, which is one of my favorites, and that is the completed look. So when we are comparing formulas and looking at how this compares to something already existing in her line, let's start with these sparkly shadows. These to me feel quite different than anything that I own from Charlotte Tilbury in previous launches and collections. These are very sparkly, very glittery, and you will feel that it's a little bit more on the chunkier side. Some of these, like this purple here, feels a little bit more creamy as opposed to this one that's more silver in tone. This one does feel like a traditional glitter shadow. You can feel that sort of texture if you're swatching in between your fingers. You will feel that, but that is because it is much more glittery than some of the other ones. I think the closest in my collection that I have to this formula as far as the sparkle would be the Hypnotizing Pop Shots. I have two of them. They came out, I believe it was last summer. And these are some of my absolute favorite eyeshadows. I bought two of them and I was hoping that they would bring back some of the other shades, but they did sell out and they didn't come back. But these do feel very buttery and very sort of pigmented. There is a metallic sort of finish to it with a little bit of sparkle, which is why these in this new Beautyverse palette seem different, because the sparkle is definitely there and very much in your face. And I like that, and you have to like that in order to appreciate this new palette. As far as the Hypnotizing Pop Shots, these I often describe them as crushed diamonds on the eye, because when the light hits it or the sunlight hits your eye, it literally looks like a dream. I just can't get enough of these. And I would love for her to come out with a palette with this Hypnotizing Pop Shot formula, because I would be all over that, because this is some of my favorite singles and honestly some of my favorites within the brand. And let's talk about the packaging. I told you the packaging is always 10 out of 10. So this one from the Hypnotizing Pop Shots has these really beautiful colored little rhinestones on it. I'm talking 10 out of 10. It's always going to be right up there when you're buying Charlotte Tilbury. So let's talk about some of her quads. I have a few to show you. This one here is the luxury palette, the Flawless Eye Filter. These are more of your typical sort of metallic shimmers, so there's really no comparison in that. I have her Pillow Talk quad and then the Exaggerize. The Exaggerize, I will say, has a shade that is very sort of topper-like. If you have this palette, it's this one here. And when I swatch my finger, I have to really kind of press my finger in there to really get some pigment, and I don't really pick up a whole ton. This again is supposed to be a topper, and I'm like really kind of scrubbing my finger in there and I'm barely getting anything. So the topper in the Exaggerize palette is no comparison to what you're getting here. This has more pigment than the topper that's in this palette. And in the Pillow Talk, there's not really one that's made to be like super sparkly. This one here in this palette has a little bit of sparkle to it, but it's a little bit more subdued. There is a little bit of a tone or undertone to this palette that goes with this. This is the original Pillow Talk Luxury palette. And there is a bit of sparkle. It's more of like a goldeny sparkle, very delicate, very soft. Again, the sparkle in this palette is a level up from this. It doesn't compare to this formula. This is truly very disco ball, very, very festive, very holiday appropriate. And then I have other palettes like her smaller ones. These are the 6-pan palettes. I have two of them. And there's really not a whole lot of comparison with this formula and this palette here, which is the Charlotte Darling look, which is the more warm tone. Love this for every day. These are your typical matte and shimmer metallic shadows with no glitter. But I did find that the future mattes in this palette remind me so much of the Super Nudes Easy Eye palette. So if you have this palette, let me hold it upside down so I don't blind you with a mirror. If you have this palette from Charlotte Tilbury, then you are very familiar with the future mattes in this palette. These are completely unique. I don't have anything in my collection that's quite like this. These are truly just creamy, but they're powders. They have that smoothness, that buttery, that velvety finish, that yumminess. They blend so well. They almost blend themselves. It's like I don't even have to do any work. I take my brush, dip it in there, and I'm done. Like it's just so easy. And you cannot go wrong with these. So these are incredibly, I swatched the same shade twice. You can't go wrong with these. These are incredibly pigmented and soft. So I would say this Super Nudes gives you very similar, if not almost exact, to what you're getting in this palette. These feel I mean, these just feel like velvet in your fingers. I can't even, they feel almost identical. So even though this is a new formula in this palette for this holiday, this formula does exist in her range already. So I try to find the colors in this palette, the Super Nudes from Charlotte Tilbury, that match up with some of the shades in the Beautyverse palette. And I will do some swatches here on the back of my hand. I will show you how these colors compare. So some of these are going to be similar and some of them are going to be just a little bit different. So they are kind of similar, especially the two taupe shades in the palettes. I feel like they are pretty much almost identical. And then some of the other brown tones, the tans, like this is the deeper color in the Charlotte Tilbury Beautyverse, and then this is the more comparable shade in the Super Nudes palette. And as you can see, the Super Nudes is just a little bit more warm. So here's the swatches of the lighter shades in the Beautyverse palette. This one in the middle is called Supernova Suede, the Future Matte. And then here is what I could find very similar to it in the Super Nudes palette from Charlotte Tilbury. So I think the closest that you're going to find if you have this palette, the taupe shade that's in here is probably, I would say, an exact dupe for the virtual taupe that's in here, which is the very first shade on the upper row. And everything else is going to be kind of similar. I didn't even swatch the pink because there is nothing even close to that in this palette. So if you have this palette, you really only have one shade that I would say is an exact dupe, and everything else is kind of close. So would you necessarily need it? I would say if you have this palette, you don't need the Beautyverse specifically for the mattes. If you get this palette after having this small one, it would be probably for the 5 sparkle shades to experience that sort of formulation from Charlotte Tilbury. Otherwise, I wouldn't say that you have to have both. If you don't like sparkles, then this is obviously not going to be a palette that I would recommend, but the mattes are just incredible. Velvet and smooth and buttery, easy to use. I don't have anything negative to say about the formula of the mattes. The formula of the shadows, the sparkly ones, I will say that I would have preferred a little bit more pigment to it, and maybe, I don't want to say scale back the glitter, but in a way, yes, because sometimes I do want a little bit of sparkle, but I don't want full-on glitter. And I feel like every time I use this palette, it's going to be full-on glitter. But even though that is somewhat of a negative, I'm not going to knock the palette itself because I think it's beautiful. I think the quality is there. And if you swatch some of these and you feel like these sparkly shades are not as pigmented and bold, they're not metallics. They're not shimmers. They're glitter type of shadows. And those sometimes tend to have a little less pigment. And they're more of those topper shades, which honestly, we're kind of seeing a trend in the makeup world of toppers. The Ethereal Eyes palette from Makeup by Mario just recently came back, and those has, you know, a few topper shades. The new holiday palette from Patrick Ta that I'm going to be reviewing has 4 sort of glitter topper type of shades in that palette as well. The Natasha Denona I Need a Nude has 2 sort of topper type of shades that have a little less pigment and more of a transparency to it, but a lot of shine and shimmer and glitter to it. So we're seeing that showing up a lot. So I am not surprised that Charlotte Tilbury created her version of it and gave you something that she sort of gives you that sort of formula to kind of, I don't want to say compete with the other brands, but just kind of be on trend with what other brands are doing and what people are loving and buying. Who doesn't like sparkle? Especially during the holidays, that's the time where you most likely will use something that's a little bit more sparkly, a little bit more dazzling on the eye than what you would wear maybe every day. So I do like this, and I do think that if you wanted something that has some sparkle and some variety, and you have nothing like this, or you don't have formulas like this in your collection, I would say go for it. But if you have a lot of glitters and a lot of sparkles, a lot of colorful palettes, then you may not even need to buy this. I think the size is great. Let's go ahead and touch on that really quickly. It's the same size as her face palettes. I have just 2 that I grabbed to show you. They are the same size as the palettes. So the top is the face palette, and then the bottom is the new Beautyverse palette. They're the exact same components, and these are also $75. If I didn't mention that in the beginning of the video, this Beautyverse palette is $75 from Charlotte Tilbury, which is more than what you would spend on the smaller palettes, more than what you would spend on the quads. However, these quads are around $54, I would say, 54, maybe 56, don't quote me exactly. I'll put all the information down below as far as comparing them for you. So these, you get 4 shades for just under 60 bucks. So 75 for 9 shades doesn't seem that bad now, does it? Earlier I was holding up my stash of palettes, and I did have this one. This one is the Bejeweled Eyes to Hypnotize. I've had this for a few years, and I can't get myself to declutter this because this is just absolutely beautiful. And again, it just goes to show that the quality of her packaging is just always going to be a 10 out of 10. And just to show you, there's nothing similar in this palette to this new Beautyverse. This is a whole different color scheme. It's a whole different formulation. The mattes in this one, if you have this palette, are your typical matte eyeshadows. These are very creamy. You're going to see a huge difference when you feel your shadows, and when you're swatching them, you will see little dents in these because there is a creamy emollient formulation to this and ingredients that go into this that really make it different and special. So that is it. I hope you found this video helpful, the comparison, kind of giving you some thoughts how this compares to some of her other colors and what we are known to expect from her brand and her formulas from previous launches, previous releases. It is different. It is very much different. And I think that if you have some other colors from Charlotte Tilbury, you will see how those are very different from what you're going to be getting if you do purchase this new Beautyverse palette. I do think it is a gem in my collection because it is very sparkly, very pretty, and when the light catches it, I do like that look. I've been enjoying that a lot lately over the coming months. You will see more looks, of course, but I've been wearing a lot of glitter in previous months and sort of incorporating those sort of metallic, sparkly shades, and I'm here for it. So I really do like it. I don't have anything really negative to say except just a little bit more pigmentation on some of these shades. But all in all, I think it's beautiful, and I just can't stop staring at this packaging. Like, what do you think? Let me know in the comments what you think of this video, what you think of the palette, the colors, the swatches, the look that I created. I will do more looks, so if you're interested in seeing another look with this palette, please let me know. I love hearing from you guys in the comment section. You guys are the best, so thank you so much for being here. The description box is going to have all the information and links for you down below for your information, anything that you need to know, and also the rest of my makeup and products that I'm wearing, I will have it listed for you as well. So thank you so much for being here. Take care, you guys, and I will talk to you very soon. Bye-bye.